Welcome to PokePeek's rankings for Season 9 of the VGC Draft League. I'm Weaver here with my co-host Hunter. In this video, we'll be breaking down groups 1 through 4, aka the groups playing on Showdown this season.
In the next video, we will be going over groups 5 through 8, aka the groups playing on Champions. For these power rankings, we graded each team based on 5 different categories.
The first category is ease of execution, basically how easy do we think the team is to pilot. Second is flexibility, how different can the team play week to week. Third is synergy, which is about how the team functions together as a unit. Perceived power is the fourth category, which is based on how many people prioritize drafting each mod within the team. And lastly, we took a look at each team's type chart, both offensively and defensively. Together, those grades were averaged into our overall scores. Alright, and kicking us off with Group 1, we have Easy Ethan. Ethan's obviously got a lot of Rain Core here. We have Prankster Rain with Sableye, we have Prankster Screens, we have Archaludon, we got a couple fast Rain Megas. What else do you think about this team?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a rain team or any weather team, you're going to have some Pokemon that you're going to have a lot of the same types. So I think that is, like, it's going to be rough for him week to week unless he makes a few trades. Like, I think a few of these Pokemon are not very good in rain. So
Right. Yeah, Charizard and Talonflame definitely, and even Heliolisk with solar power, right, prefers not to be in rain. And then I think you have a bit of redundant megas here where Greninja and Sharpedo kind of do the same thing. They have the same, like, true stabs.
Yeah, but I think overall the synergy is pretty decent, but I think there are some better teams in this group.
For sure. And this team is also definitely predictable. Like, going into this, you know that it's going to be setting up rain. Its really only other mode is the kind of like tanky Archaludon mode. But even then, you really prefer to be in the rain, and people can kind of prep for that to be coming. So, next up, we have Furious Gold's team. He's got some key players here. He's got Whimsicott, Torkoal, Vileplume. Torkoal, Vileplume, really good, strong combo. I think Vileplume is way better than a tier 3 when paired with Torkoal. But obviously, we do have some weak megas here and maybe not the best overall team cohesion speed-wise.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that points out to me is, like you said, the megas. Like, he has very lower tier mega Pokemon. Now, granted, he does have what I think is probably the best tier 1 Pokemon in Whimsicott, but I don't think he has a ton of damage around Whimsicott that can really benefit from its support.
Typically, you want something like a Goldango with like fat spread damage, or something like Glamora with like really high single target damage.
Yeah, I just think overall this team is going to be pretty hard to play week by week.
I agree. I also think that speed tier wise is just a little difficult. Like we said, Torkoal can't really play in Tailwind. Something like Blaziken doesn't really want to play in Trick Room, and so you end up in these weird situations where which 6 do you bring? Are we bringing kind of 3 Pokemon for Tailwind, 3 Pokemon for Trick Room, and there's one odd man out every time? There's definitely some good things here, but I agree with you. I think they might be trying to do a little bit too much, and maybe sticking with one mode might make the team a little bit easier to play. Up next, we have Motkar. He's got kind of a pseudo Trick Room, Tail Room team here.
I think that Mega Gardevoir here is probably one of the weaker Pokemon for Tier 0. I think you probably could have had some better options, but I think a few of these Pokemon kind of don't belong here. Like, it's hard to play Rotom Frost outside of Snow. And, like, overall, like you said, it's a Trick Room team, I think. So,
right, and I think that Blastoise Fergraph is one of those combos where you really can consistently get Trick Room up. I do think it's tough on the Gardevoir side because you lack the fake out support of something like a base Kangaskhan or the redirection of a Mousehold, where getting Trick Room up for Gardevoir doesn't seem that easy, but the Tailwind mode for Gardevoir also is not that easy either. Volcarona obviously can play redirection and it can play Tailwind support, but it doesn't really want to be in that role. And so I think outside of the pairing of Blastoise for Farigiraf, this team falls a little short for me.
yeah, I don't think it's very flexible. I don't even think there's a reason to run Tailwind on Volcarona. Like most of his Pokemon are just too slow to run in Tailwind.
Moving on, we have Major Domo.
Now, he has very strong higher tier Pokemon. Like, I think Frostlass is very underrated. King Gambit and Aerodactyl are some of the best Pokemon in their respective tiers, and I think Mega Feraligatr as a secondary Mega option is actually pretty easy to use, and it's pretty good for a tier 2.
Yeah, I have to agree. I also think that with Frostlass, because one of its main threats are rock types, fire types, etc., I think Feraligatr matches up well. And obviously, Frostlass takes care of the opposing dragons. You know, you have King Gambit for the fairies and opposing ghost types. I actually think this team is pretty solid, and you have a few different modes. You can even run Feraligatr in Trick Room with King Gambit, you know? The setup for that is relatively weak, but the mode does exist, and I also think something like Lycanroc is really great into opposing ice types in both Tailwind and Trick Room, so I feel like you have pretty solid options here, and the stab coverage is really nice across this team.
Yeah, I do like some of the value of these lower tier picks too, like Empoleon and Raichu, and then Glaceon in Snow is very easy to use, so I think there's a great synergy there.
I agree. Next up, we have Leg Kick Spammer. And he's running a Mega Floette team with a lot of other pretty solid, valuable low tier non megas.
I mean, obviously Floette is widely considered probably the second or best Mega Pokemon in the format. I think Basculegion is a very good non-Mega Tier 1. I do think only having one Mega can be rough in certain weeks, but it's Floette, so I don't know how much it really matters.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
that you do have good supports here where Ariados can eliminate a lot of the problems that Floette can have. You do have wide guard support from Aegislash. You do have the ability to run fast or slow on this team. You do even have things like Frisk on the Noivern if you're worried about, for example, a Scarfed Goldengo one-shotting your Floette.
I think this team's pretty easy to use. I would say that Basculegion and Aegislash both sharing a ghost typing could be a little scary against
Hmm.
certain Pokemon. Like if he goes against a Mega Gengar, that's good into all of his top Pokemon, you know?
Right, and the
Uh,
two ghost immunities that you do have on this team are your tier 5s, and so you're probably not bringing them very often. Whereas Scrafty's obviously a great pivot, but it's also weak to Fairy, which Floette obviously buffs Fairy types, so you can be a little problematic in that regard. But overall, this team is really solid.
yeah, I agree. I think it's probably the best one of these teams so far.
Next up, we have Reverse Knockout.
Speaking of Mega Gengar,
Yeah, I'm obviously biased. I think Mega Gengar is the best tier 0 in the format, just because it's the same strength as a Floette or a Charizard, but it's just so much more flexible in what it can do. I also think you have great value picks here. I think Mega Crabominable in tier 2, probably the best Trick Room Mega in the format. Oranguru, one of the best Trick Room setters in the format. Vivillon, I think, is the best, arguably one of the best value picks in the entire draft. I think
yeah,
this
I
team
mean,
has really solid value.
yeah, I do like the duo fake out as well, and you have different options for Trick Room setters like Meowstic, Oranguru, and Malamar can all set up Trick Room. Only thing I worry about is Gengar maybe being a little too fast.
I think that this team does feel slightly out of place for Gengar outside of the Incineroar. It definitely, if you remove the Gengar from this and put a curtain over it, I think you would assume that that's another Trick Room Mega, right? This team highly operates on Trick Room, and Meowstic with screens doesn't necessarily benefit Gengar the best. But I think with Gengar being as strong as it is, it can fit pretty much into any composition, and having Incin, I think it can work week to week.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think these Pokemon are just strong enough to be able to work in most matchups, even without Trick Room.
Something like Gengar is so warping in prep that you might focus on that and then just get ran over by Mega Crab and Trick Room. So next up we have Vized. And he's got Mega Electros and Mega Aerodactyl alongside Mega Sceptile. So a lot of Megas on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these megas do different things, so you can easily bring one or the other, like depending on what your matchup is. I think Electros and Aerodactyl go really well with his tier 1 and Garchomp.
Hmm.
Obviously, they can't be EQ'd. Same with Orthworm. And I think overall, this just is very good for a Garchomp team.
But absolutely, this is some of the best pairings you could possibly ask for Garchomp. Like you said, you have the double immunities with Eel and Aerodactyl. You have the Orthworm, which can set up Shed Tail. Garchomp can even heal it. You also have Milo to deter Intimidates. Vanillux,
And
obviously, for opposing dragons.
I think Vanillux, obviously, I like Vanillux, but I think Hisuian Typhlosion is a very good value pick. Like, I
Agreed.
think this thing is better than what its tier shows, especially if you run Scarf Eruption. It can be a huge threat into most teams.
The same note with Wordeer as well. I feel like this thing didn't get drafted enough because it's so good for non-Trick Room teams as your Imprison user. Not only does it have Intimidate, it has a signature move that ups its defense, making it harder to remove while dealing damage. It's really, really strong at being able to just tank hits and reverse Trick Room. And for a team as fast as this that wants to play base 150 speed Aerodactyl, base 145 speed Sceptile, probably Scarfed Garchomp most of the time, or Scarfed Typhlosion. This team really hates Trick Room, and so I love a pick like Wordeer to just say, if you want to bring Trick Room, you got to get through this.
And he also has a Torterra on his team, which I'm a big fan of. So
All right, moving on, we have Polar Palace.
one of the first Mega Raichu Ys we're gonna see. I don't think a lot of people picked this Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty polarizing. I'm personally not a fan. I know that you are.
I think it's very good.
I think for draft specifically, I don't like how fixed its moveset is and how frail it is, but its damage and its utility with Zap Cannon is obviously through the roof, so.
Like other than that, I think he has a lot of good value picks here. I think Golurk is it's like Mega Crab in the sense that it's very good in Trick Room. I think this team is pretty hard to run Trick Room though in
Mhm.
most matchups. Like he has a lot of fast Pokemon. Like Raichu Y is one of the fastest Pokemon in the format.
Right. It's not like something you have like a Vivillon where you can just be mashing Rage Powder plus EQ with Golurk as like kind of an alternative to the Trick Room mode. On this team, it's pretty much Golurk plus one Fake Out user. You can't really run it in Tailwind. And the Trick Room
Yeah,
setter options don't really want to be in Trick Room in Alakazam and Meowscarada, so.
yeah, and if you do want to run Fake Out beside Golurk, it has to be Tinkaton, or else you're running Raichu without an item. So I think
Yeah,
that
another thing for that is Raichu on some teams outside of Mega can get value with Lightning Rod as a fake out support. This team can't really utilize that. And so if you're bringing Raichu, it's probably just as a Mega. And so, like you said, that fake out support is really just coming from Tinkaton. So I like the idea here. I just feel like the sequencing to actually use Mega Golurk feels really tough. And so you probably bring in Raichu most weeks, and Raichu sets are already inflexible.
I definitely would like to see him maybe get another Mega other than Golurk, but we can see what he does in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, overall, it's a solid team here. I just think Golurk's a little out of place.
Yeah, I agree.
Next up, we have Sleevedora, and obviously he was picking based on wheel for this, so we tried not to give it too much criticism. Obviously, he was playing with his hands tied a little bit, but not really a big fan of the Charizard Mega X.
Or the Mega Clefable.
Yeah, arguably some of the weakest Megas within their tier. Mega Dragonite, pretty solid though.
Yeah, I mean, other than the first two Megas, I think there are some pretty good value picks here. Like Serena as a priority blocker, I'm a big fan of. I think Klefki is just like a budget Sableye in a sense.
Yeah, it's not as flexible because obviously it has a significantly lower move pool, but it does have decent damage with Dazzling Gleam and Flash Cannon, so
Yeah, I think this team might be a little difficult to use though, considering he only has two fake outs, and while Pikachu is a fake out user, it's not the strongest, and
mhm.
Blastoise running fake out when it's just normal Blastoise, I feel like it's a little harder to use.
Yeah, I do really worry about what this team does if it ever falls behind in a game because it does feel like it's very all or nothing. Like if Charizard gets a Dragon Dance off without dying, it's in a good spot. If Charizard takes way too much chip on that setup, for example, or if Dragonite gets multi-scale popped before you get Tailwind off, I feel like this team, it feels like it's really going to struggle to get back into games where it's losing from the start. But I think it can put the foot on the gas. Like if Charizard can get one or two Dragon Dances off, and you have screens or you have Clefable next to it, or if Blastoise can get a Shell Smash off next to Pikachu for free, maybe this team can do something, because Serena obviously is great at protecting you from opposing tempo stealers, like swapping in a bulky Fake Out and to get your own Tailwind up to match, but I do really worry about this team if it ever falls behind in sets.
Yeah, I agree. I think most weeks this will be pretty difficult to handle.
Moving on, we have Look It Up's team.
Now, first off, I mean, I'm a big fan of Mega Staraptor. I think it's one of my favorite megas in the game. Having some good supports for it is obviously ideal. I don't think that Liepard is one of the best supports that you could have. Like, I would have liked to see him draft something else. Maybe it was taken already.
Mm-hmm.
But
I do think it can function as a budget Whimsicott. It pretty much gets everything Whimsicott gets except Tailwind, but obviously Tailwind is a huge proponent.
yeah, but you have other, like, Staraptor can set up Tailwind itself, and so
Mhm.
can Hydreigon, so it's not the end of the world.
I don't hate it that much. I think Liepard is one of the mons that I put highest for its tier, but I do agree it's not really the ideal pairing of the format like something like Whimsicott might be.
I do think he has some good value picks here. Like, I think Diggersby is probably the best value in the entire draft. I think regular Scovillain is really good
Agreed.
as a redirector, and then Hydreigon and Glamora, like, I think those two Pokemon work very well together. So the
Hmm.
value there is very strong.
Yeah, and Mega Mawile is obviously, I think it's probably middle of the road for tier 0. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's necessarily good. As somebody who used it last season, I think it's most flexible when you have the ability to play it in Trick Room and not. On this roster, it kind of feels like it's relegated to the Trick Room mode, but we'll have to see what Look It Up can cook.
He's one of the better players we have in the league.
So I'm curious to see how he pilots this one. I think it's strong. I think it's just going to be really difficult to use. But if anybody
Yeah.
can pull it off, he can. Moving on to Group 2, we have Cruiser's team.
This is kind of the same thing as the other Garchomp team from earlier. Like, he
Hmm.
has two Levitates and then a Flying Top with Garchomp. I think these are very good, like, Pokemon beside Garchomp. Milotic
Hmm.
is obviously really good against, like, beside Delphox and Corviknight as well. I'm a little scared of the lack of Fake Out, with just
Hmm.
Scrafty being the only one, and it also being weak to Fairy just like Garchomp is.
The other thing, too, is you also have Chestnut, who is your wide guard user on the team, but that's also weak to Fairy. And so I do think that this team might struggle a bit into Fairy types. Corviknight, notably not the most offensive Pokemon in terms of its steel damage. Bulk up sets can obviously get the job done, but I think that the starting core here, Garchomp, Milo, Corv, Delphox, great. Like you said, I would like a little bit more support, maybe some more Fake Out, maybe some redirection. I think redirection specifically for Delphox is really good for the nasty plot sets. The other thing too about this team is the speed control is not necessarily that reliable. Corviknight is not that like on-demand fast tailwind setter to change the tide, and the Trick Room mode feels really difficult to sequence here, especially with such a fast Mega in Delphox that you probably want to bring every week.
Yeah, and I do worry about these lower tier Pokemon as well. Like, I think
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
that they
think they're
have their
strong.
place, but I think that they're definitely not the easiest to use because while
Yeah,
they have a niche, that niche was not necessarily the strongest, and other Pokemon can do it better. Next up in Group 2, we have Cairo's team.
I think Scovillain, Mega Scovillain it's one of my favorite Megas in the entire format. I think it's very strong. And you're running a Sun team, and like, this is a weird Sun team because you usually see Charizard Y in
Mhm.
Sun, but maybe Ninetales and Charizard X could be something that is actually good and people just don't know about it.
Yeah, you also
Uh,
have the option to use Charizard without clicking Mega on this team. I will say it does have a lot of fire types. I'm personally more of a fan of Scovillain when it has something like a Sylveon or this like bulky spread damage attacker who's really slow but really prefers the redirection. In this case, I just feel like there's a lot of overlapping weaknesses. Scovillain is obviously weak to rock. The things that want to be setting up next to it on this team are weak to rock. Ariados is your secondary redirection user, also weak to rock. And so it just feels like there's some good ideas here. It just feels like when you put it all together, it might be difficult to use.
yeah, I agree. I mean, you do have good redirection. So maybe we can do something with Dragon Dance, Charizard under Sun. But other than that, I think we'll see.
All right, next up we have Captain Yoshi's team.
I think he has some pretty good value picks here. I like Aerodactyl as a tier 2. Obviously, I picked it up as well. Mega Kangaskhan, I think, is personally one of the strongest tier 1 megas.
Yeah, I think Mega Kangaskhan is one of those megas where it's just so easy to use that it feels like it makes most teams better just by having it. It's obviously really good fake out Tailwind turn 1. It's really good to fake out Trick Room turn 1. Fake out setup beside you turn 1. This team
Yeah.
really, what it gains in ease of execution, it loses in terms of predictability.
I agree, but I also think that there are some Pokemon here that can be unpredictable. Like you can run a fast Tailwind team, but you can also run a Trick Room team with Mimikyu, Dragalge, and King Gambit. So
Mm-hmm.
you really don't know what he's playing until you see the 6 that he brings for that
Right.
week.
And even in that 6, Kangaskhan could be neutral speed, and you could play it. I'm going to get Tailwind up for my advantage. You brought Fast Mons, I'm going to get Trick Room up for my advantage, and basically just play to whatever the opponent is doing within the match itself. So this team is pretty
I think
solid.
overall it's really strong, yeah.
Next, we have Amphibians team.
It's another Mega Gardevoir. The first Mega Pyroar that we have seen with Torkoal and Farigiraf. That's a big team that people have been using on ladder.
And I used it specifically as well. I had Mega Scrafty as my secondary Mega, but I think that the core of Torkoal, Farig, Pyroar, Vileplume, extremely strong. The team is really easy to use. Obviously, Farigiraf can both facilitate Pyroar because it's so fast, so you can't fake it out, and it can facilitate Torkoal because it's so slow, setting up Trick Room. The biggest question mark for me with this team is where Mega Gardevoir fits in. Spending so much of your budget on a tier 0, it feels a little out of place when everything else is dedicated to Sun.
Yeah, I agree, but there could be some weeks where you don't even want to run Sun, and that is when Gardevoir could be useful. I think the issue with that is most of his Pokemon are only good in Sun.
And then you have the question of if you're running Gardevoir, there's no real Tailwind setter here. Actually, I don't think there's a single Tailwind setter in general.
There's not, no.
The fake out user that you would want to help Gardevoir set up Trick Room for itself is extremely fast and frail, and so it feels like the sequencing on the Gardevoir side probably pretty difficult. That being said, the Sun side extremely strong. I just think it's a little disjointed with the Gardevoir.
Yeah, this team is very strong and very easy to use except for the Gardevoir, like you said.
All right, after that, we have Fed's team. So obviously you have strong fake out support with the Sneasler. It's good into opposing fairies for the Floette.
I think Sneasler's probably probably the best support beside Floette. We're gonna see a trend of people that pick Floette don't draft a secondary Mega, which I'm not a big fan of.
I agree.
But obviously Floette is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Mega Pokemon in the format.
But yeah, like you said, he's got great tools here to hit opposing steel types and poison types. So he's got decent speed control with Talonflame for the more offensive Floette weeks. He's got redirection with the Scovillain. He does have a Trick Room mode. I think it's probably the weakest mode of this team at the moment. Yeah, ultimately, I feel like this is a decent Mega Floette team. Pretty sure his trades, pretty sure it was Basculegion over the Sneasler and Toxicroak over Blastoise, I think. I
I'm
feel
not the
like
biggest fan of those trades, but
I agree. I like this iteration of the roster personally.
yeah, I think this is a little bit better.
But overall, pretty solid team. Next up, we have Arrow's team.
Another Mega Gengar.
Yep. Obviously, Arrow packed in a lot of very popular picks into this one. You can see how high that perceived power bar is. Basically, all that means is other people really wanted to draft the same things that he did. Crammed a lot of value into this one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these Pokemon work pretty well together. Like, obviously, Mousehold is really good with Gengar, and then you have Diggersby, Electros, Hydreigon, like, very good, like, EQ spamming there. You have not the best Tailwind setter in the format, but it can work, and then
Right.
Tinkaton is very strong fake out as
Yeah,
well.
and I think Hydreigon has a weird niche on this team where it is actually a great defensive pivot for Gengar. right? Obviously, it's got a ground immunity, it's got a dark resist, it's got a psychic immunity. It actually functions really well there. And then obviously, Electros is immune to the ground types that Gengar would otherwise be threatened by. This team is pretty solid. I think my biggest fear with this team is just, is there enough damage to go around? Because we do have some overlapping stabs, some relatively predictable sets. The eel does need some help to get going to deal damage, but
I worry about the speed control, like outside of Tailwind, and it's only one Pokemon, so it could be rough in some matchups.
yeah, you do have Liepard with Prankster and Follow Me to kind of bridge that gap, but at the same time, something like a Diggersby without a consistent Tailwind does feel kind of lackluster. Overall, really solid team. Next up, we have WBS.
Is this the first Mega Charizard WoW that we have seen, or second?
I think it's the first.
That's pretty surprising to me. Obviously, no one in Group 1 picked it if it is the first.
Mhm.
I think Mega Charizard WoW with Ensign is a little bit redundant. Like, obviously, they do different things, but the typing
Right.
is.
Yeah, and there were some teams at in-person events that were using the Sun for Incineroar. Obviously, Flare Blitz is its best move. It does increase its damage. But in draft, it does create kind of a redundancy where if somebody knows Mega Charizard's coming and they bring Rain to offset it, that's also neutralizing Incin's damage, right? And so I don't necessarily know if it's bad so much as it is polarizing. Like, you need to keep your weather control because both of these Pokemon prefer not to be in the rain.
Yeah. I also feel like Charizard, with how strong, like, even though it's a very strong Pokemon, I think it's pretty out of place here. You don't have any other Pokemon other than Ensign that work good in Sun.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have a Chlorophyll user, and overall your team is it's pretty slow. You don't have a Tailwind.
Right.
I think this team is going to be pretty hard to use.
Yeah, I think if you had something like, for example, Garchomp Tier 1, maybe it's like, okay, well, I have really great spread damage, so my speed tiers don't matter as much. I have the immunity, etc. Or if you had something like Arrow, you have very consistent speed control. Here it does feel like it's going to be a little difficult to use Charizard just because, like you said, it doesn't really have that speed control to keep the tempo up and keep the foot on the gas. And things like Gyarados probably don't want to be in the sun either. It does feel like maybe we need a little bit more pieces that operate better in the sun to kind of facilitate that and keep control of the game once you have it.
Yeah, that could just be somebody took the Chlorophyll users before him or something
Right.
in the draft.
Yeah, there were a plethora of them though, so I feel like even if you have to dip into the tier 4 bag and pick a victory bell, I like that better than something like
Yeah,
Hisui Future for
Zoroark.
this team. Right,
Something.
exactly. Overall, not a bad team. I just think that it's probably going to be difficult to play because all eyes are on Charizard, and it's doubly worse because your secondary Mega isn't that good, and your tier 1 pick really prefers to be in Sun as well.
I agree.
Next up, we have Emelgabon. Kind of a speed sandwich team here. Obviously, you have Mega Alakazam, which is one of the fastest Megas in the format, and then we have Mega Mawile, who prefers to be in Trick Room, and then we have a couple other Mons that can kind of go either way, but a lot of Trick Room users here.
Yeah, with Snorlax and Mawile, I think you kind of know that this team wants to run Trick Room most weeks. I think Mega Alakazam is a little bit out of place, but maybe
I
just
agree.
kind of wanted the speed control.
I think
Because
it
you,
does have some modes to it, like you can set up Prankster, Psychic Terrain, and Psy Spam with Alakazam. Sinistra is obviously a good support because of the redirection with such a frail attacker. You do have Wide Guard support on this team with Conkeldurr, I believe, but it is so Trick Room inclined that it does feel a little weird to see it here.
but I do like a unique pick like Snorlax in a draft format like this, where the overall tier of teams will be weaker, so you're not going to see the same Pokemon every week. So Snorlax value can go up a lot in a format like this.
Yeah, I think it's good synergy with Mawile too because of Thick Fat. Like it can
And
just swap into
Sinistcha.
right. It can swap into any fire type attack and pretty much take no damage after leftovers healing. So I think lack of Tailwind is going to hurt the Alakazam modes a lot in this one, but if they choose not to bring a Trick Room mode, it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. So,
Yeah.
curious to see how they play it. Next up, we have Casual Pizza. So he's running a team that's very similar to what James is running in the Wolfie Draft League. So he's got the Mega Blastoise, Mega Lucario, Vivillon.
Obviously, Lucario is one of my favorite Pokemon, but I think Mega Lucario for a tier 2 is a big steal.
I agree.
It is, that thing just hits so hard, and it can run so many different sets, so you really don't know what you're playing against each week.
Yeah, it can run setup, it can run just ripping, it can run special, it can run physical, it can run
It can be bulky.
moves. Yeah.
Having Blastoise with Vivillon obviously is one of the better duos for Vivillon. And I think Zoroark makes this team really tricky to play against in certain matchups because he has a good amount of fighting weaknesses. So having a ghost type that can just disguise itself as a fighting weakness is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think the other thing about this team is I'm pretty sure you only have one activatable ability on Intimidate with Arcanine, and so this is a perfect Zoroark team. Obviously, Hatterene is weak to ghost types, Lucario is weak to fighting types, Kangaskhan is also weak to fighting types. I think Zoroark is really good in this team, and it can throw a lot of curveballs to a team that's already pretty hard to prep for.
Yeah, I think overall this team, other than the Zoroark, which I personally find to be a little difficult, this team is pretty easy to use.
Yeah, Fake Out Trick Room, Fake Out Tailwind, Sleep Powder Shell Smash, Sleep Powder Bulk Up. You know, the lines are pretty easy for most teams. I think this is probably the strongest team that we've seen so far.
I agree.
Next up, we have History. We have Whimsicott Rotom Wash with Mega Metagross.
Mega Metagross being the only Mega on the team is a little interesting. I do think it's really good with Whimsicott and something like Rotom Wash. Because obviously Rotom resists the fire types that both Whimsicott and Metagross are scared of.
Right, Metagross is also weak to ground, so that's, obviously a great ground pivot.
This team it's pretty fast, especially with the priority Tailwind. But I do think a few of these Pokemon are a little out of place with the Aggron and Golurk. Obviously, they're lower tier Pokemon, so they don't matter too much, but...
I'm surprised more people didn't pick Basculegion F. Just FYI, Basculegion Male does not actually have that high of an attack stat, and Basculegion F, with multiple stacks of Last Respects, will OHKO stuff too. Obviously is good for Mega Metagross, who doesn't like opposing ghost types. Scarfed Basculegion F with ghost moves can still take those things out. I think there's a lot of good here. I think not having Fake Out is not ideal, and I think it's a little bit inflexible since you only have the one Mega, but I think this team is, it's pretty average, and I think it's pretty easy to use.
I do think this team is pretty good, but the simple fact that it's not very popular is very interesting.
Yeah.
To me. You don't see a lot of these picks everywhere else.
Yeah, Basculegion F, Hippowdon, base Golurk, really nobody picking. Even Espathra, I feel like, was underpicked for how good it is. I personally like seeing it with special attacking Megas, because Luminacrash drops the special defense of the target by 2, and then you have the Calm Mind Baton Pass modes. This team doesn't really have that, but ultimately, pretty middle-of-the-road team, pretty solid. I think this one is kind of a player diff one. You'll probably win most weeks if you're the better player, but I don't think this team is that insane just because of its lack of flexibility. Right, so moving on to Group 3.
Another Mega Gengar and Mega Crab.
Yep, pretty interesting combo. Because like we talked about with the last iteration of this team, really different speed tiers and pretty different needs for the team.
You obviously have a good Tailwind setter and a good Trick Room setter, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to know exactly what you want week by week. The default is just going to be, I think, just Talonflame with Tailwind and Gengar, but I think he also has some pretty good value picks. Like, I think Quaquaval, I think that is a good value pick if you can understand how to use it.
You also have Wordeer, which I addressed previously. I think it's a great tier 3 for Trick Room or anti-Trick Room. I think Morpeko is... I put it as one of the best tier 4s in the format. The only other thing with Fake Out Parting Shot in the entire format, Incineroar. If you want a budget version of that, Morpeko is great. And I actually think that it's relatively solid for Trick Room teams, and it seems unintuitive, but the problem for some Trick Room teams in this format is that their sequencing becomes difficult. What Morpeko can do is fake out to help set up Trick Room, and then either A, die because it's very frail, or B, have a slow, because it's fast in Trick Room, parting shot on turn 2 to get your carry in safely. And then you still have 3 turns of Trick Room to lay down some haymakers.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall this team, it's pretty decent. It might be, like I said, hard to know exactly what you want to bring each week, but I think this team is not too bad, and it has some decent synergies here too.
I think the problem is going to be when you bring Talonflame and Gengar, can we bring Mega Crabominable in the same week with our Trick Room mode? Who knows? But I think if SJ can figure out how to mesh these two modes together into a cohesive team, I think it'll be pretty solid. Next up in Group 3, we have Little Oof.
I think this is, I could be wrong, but I think this is the only person that drafted Mega Floette with another Mega in the entire draft.
Which is ironic because this is one of the Megas that I expect people not to Mega Evolve most of the time in Meowstic. I think Garchomp, Aerodactyl, Mega Floette is really solid. Obviously, Floette hates Steel and Poison types. Garchomp eats those up. Obviously, Floette struggles against AoE attacks. You have one of the best Wide Guard users in the format. Great speed control. You do have a redirector in Volcarona. You do have competitive for the Garchomp with Empoleon and Defiant with Phalanx. Obviously, you get a great budget Prankster setter with Meowstic. I think this team's pretty solid.
Yeah, and with this being the first Mega Meowstic that we've seen, obviously we know that if you pick Mega Meowstic, you get your choice of either one of male or female, which I think can be like a prepping nightmare for some teams because you really don't know what you're playing against.
Especially with a team like this where you have a bunch of physical attackers that do solid damage as your top tier picks.
Like you kind of want to bring Intimidate, and then you can just run female with competitive.
Obviously, the downside of that is if you make the wrong call, you're kind of stuck with a dud Mega, but it does kind of add that element. On this team, obviously it's a little redundant. You have Empoleon, but you still have that option there if it's maybe a tough matchup to bring Empoleon, but you still want competitive for the Intimidates. Overall, pretty solid team. You can't really go wrong with Mega Floette and Garchomp.
It's a pretty easy duo to use.
Yeah, especially with the Aerodactyl, so. Alright, next up we have Charlie's team.
Now, I think that this is one of the hardest teams to use that we have seen so far.
I agree, and I think Mega Excadrill as a Mega, especially when you have the base form in Sand mode without Sash, I think is probably the hardest. It's the hardest Mega to use in and out of Mega, I think, in the format. Excadrill, when it's in base form, obviously really likes Sash. Mega Excadrill obviously needs significantly more setup than base Excadrill, and so it feels like bringing the pieces to support it both in and out of Mega is really tough. I think the same can be said for Electros, right? If you're bringing Mega Excadrill for Earthquake, you can bring base Eel, but then you're playing base Eel. So it's...
Yeah.
I think that if somebody can put all of this together, it does feel like it's insanely flexible, but it does feel like it's really, really hard to play because it's so not straightforward. And you also have contradicting weather, so...
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, having sand and snow, which are widely considered two of the weakest, like, weathers as well, is kind of... Which you do have some synergies with each one. Like, you have snow with Glaceon, or you have sand with base Excadrill and Houndstone. So I think you do have some flexibility there. It's a lot of flexibility, but it's going to be really hard to use most weeks.
Yeah, I just think you're lacking Glumons, where in this team it feels like you have a lot of small pairings, and putting together a cohesive 6 feels like it's a really difficult task. But if you can pull it off, it seems like it might be good.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see what they run like every week because it could be very different each week.
Mhm. Next up, we have purples with the Whooper Warriors. So he's running solo Mega Metagross again.
I think that I don't know what happened in the draft, but I think that the previous person we just looked at, Charlie, that had the Mega Excadrill, got sniped the base Excadrill, and then he was like, "Screw it, I'm just going Mega anyway." But I also think that base Excadrill makes not much sense here.
Really, the only synergy that you can see on this roster is like slow Life Orb Excadrill in Trick Room next to a Rangaroo, so you can spam EQ with telepathy. But at that point, why not just use it with a flying type in
Like,
in a fast mode with Tailwind?
yeah, like I actually think both of these teams would be infinitely better if they just swapped the base and Mega
Yeah,
Excadrill.
valid. Very valid. Mega Excadrill actually does make a decent amount of sense here with
It
the.
makes a lot more sense here. This is a heavy Trick Room team.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think that like most of these Pokemon can run in Trick Room, but I think your Mega is going to be the hardest one to run in Trick Room
Yeah, at 110
because
base
obviously
speed,
your
Mega
strongest
Metagross
Pokemon.
is very fast, and so
Yeah,
that's not easy to use in Trick Room. And other people with slower Mons on their team are going to be able to take advantage of that. Pretty much the only other synergy you have here is like Slowbro's best stab is going to be Surf. Oranguru can't be hit by it. Obviously, Trick Room is easy to get up when you have Kangaskhan for Fake Out. I think it's going to be tough to use. Your only other speed control is really Skarmory Tailwind or Gengar with Icy Wind. So this team feels
yeah.
like it's not the
I,
hardest because it's so focused on Trick Room, but I think overall it doesn't mesh that well, and it's pretty unique picks which are perceived to be relatively weak based on popularity.
yeah, I agree. I also think that there's just too many Trick Room setters here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, redundant roles for sure. Up next, we have Foodie's team.
Foodie.
So another Mega for Alligator.
His only Mega though, which I'm not sure if I'm a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously it's strong with Dragon Eyes, but there's a lot of fairy types around in this meta. So it, but you have Corviknight, but that's kind of like I guess that and Tinkaton are the only things scaring fairy types away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Tinkaton merchant. Obviously, Rotom can switch in on it too, because that is a fairy resist, but I do agree. I like the Feraligatr as a secondary mega option. I don't know about primary. I think the other thing about this team is it kind of feels like you want to be playing in rain most of the time. Obviously, Corviknight, Sinistcha, Starmie, Feraligatr, they all prefer to be in rain. Overquill, obviously, special
Overkill.
user.
Yeah.
Yep. There's no real great way to set up rain on this team.
I agree, but I do think that it's not the easiest team to play, but you can. I think any of these 11 Pokemon, except for maybe I'd say Starmie, could be brought in any week. I think Starmie's pretty weak as
I
a
think for a tier
Pokemon.
5, it's honestly not that bad, but I do see your point. I think the main issue with this team for me is just it's solo mega, which is predictable,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel like it has the strongest speed control options.
You have Tailwind, you have two Trick Room, or I guess three Trick Room setters, but most of your Pokemon don't really want to be in Trick Room.
Honestly, I think this is a team where Lipard would be a great tier 3. Prankster Rain Setter for the Overquill, more fake out support, Prankster Encore Disable, stuff like that. I think this team needs one or two more glue units to really get that rain mode online. But I think the structure is solid here. I think
Yeah,
it
it's
just
not
doesn't feel
terrible.
the easiest to use. Next we have Ogre's team.
The Mega Dragonite Merchant.
Mega Dragonite Merchant. This team is pretty solid. Audino obviously isn't really a Mega, so we're looking at Dragonite Scrafty as the duo, which I don't hate.
I mean, I'm a fan of Mega Scrafty. I think it's pretty good, especially in a draft format. The only thing I don't like is that both of your Megas are super weak to Fairy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think in tier 2, Scrafty with double intimidate, fantastic Pokemon. But this team is, like you said, having two megas that are weak to fairy, with one of them being quad, does feel really bad.
Yeah, but you can get around that with, like, I think Clefable is much better than Mega Clefable. You can run Follow Me on that. You have Aegislash, you have Rage Powder. Like, you can get around that, but if you go against a Dazzling Gleam or a Hyper Voice, I think it'll be kind of rough.
Yeah, I think that Aegislash is one of the better Pokemon into fairies because of that. Obviously, it's a steel type that also
It
has
gets
wide
wide
guard,
guard.
but that positioning does become difficult, and then you're playing 50-50s where you probably just want to be attacking with Aegislash and protecting with your Mega in that instance anyway, but it's nice to have the option.
One more thing I will say is that this team is very popular. Like almost all these Pokemon were picked in another group.
Yeah, Mamoswine was unanimous, Vivillon was unanimous, Milo was unanimous. This team is popular through the roof. The picks on this team people think are really strong based on how many people picked them. It's just a matter of if the synergies end up meshing well together and if it's easy to use. I think it's not the easiest team we've seen, but I think you got a lot of value crammed into this, and if you can cook up a consistent game plan week to week, you should be chilling. And on, we have Lucky's team. So Lucky's team is a bit of an oddball because we have essentially solo Mega Scovillain, unless the Altaria is brought, which as a tier 4 Mega, we established when we reviewed it earlier, we think it's one of the weaker ones. But Scovillain it's really solid, it's really strong, but it's obviously a support.
Yeah, my issue is that I think Scovillain and Mousehold do very similar things. Obviously, I think both Pokemon are good with a Pokemon like Goldingo, but I think that if you're bringing, like, you have to bring Mega Scovillain every week. I think unless there is a like a good Altaria game, but I don't see that being a thing. So like I don't really know what Mousehold is gonna be doing too much of.
Right, and it can contribute offensively with Population Bomb, and it does have a fast Encore, Super Fang, etc. But I do agree it's a little bit redundant. The thing that I do like about this team is if you're gonna pick a supportive Mega like Mega Scovillain, I think Goldengo is a great option. Goldengo is one of the hardest hitting Pokemon in the format. Obviously, Nasty Plot plus Make It Rain is great setup. Good luck dealing with that. Prim is one of the better spread damage attackers in the format. You also have Liepard for prankster stuff. I think
Staraptor is a good Tailwind for tier 3.
Right, even Final Gambit, if there's something that threatens Scovillain, we can just Scarf Final Gambit it, and then we can burn everything else. Like if they have one big special attacker, like a Mega Floette, or a special attacker that can hit Scovillain for super effective damage, just Final Gambit it, right? Scovillain can deal with the rest.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think the team is very easy to use. I just, like we noted before, I think that Mousehold and Scovillain are very redundant.
And I think that weeks where Goldango can't shoulder the damage load, this team might fall short.
Yeah, there will be some weeks where it's going to be hard to bring for sure.
But like a Leftovers Calm Mind Primarina set can play long. I think that it's definitely flexible and it's obviously crammed full of popular picks. I think it's just going to be a matter of if Scovillain really has the supporting cast for them to pump out the damage while it eats the buck.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see.
And next up, we have Sean's team. So another Charizard X team.
I mean, I think this is actually the first person we've seen take Sylveon. I could be wrong.
I think you're correct.
I don't remember seeing a Sylveon. Which I think Sylveon with Lucario and Charizard X is pretty good, like, as a duo.
Yeah, ironically, I think Sylveon in place of Mousehold on the last team would be infinitely better. That's not the situation here, but I agree. Sylveon's a great pick. It feels like kind of a budget Mega Floette. I think it's solid.
Overall, this team is going to be a little difficult to use. Like, you do have some harder Pokemon like Zoroark and Decidueye, but like you kind of, I mean, Diggersby is very easy to use, and then you have a lot of like flexible Pokemon, but there's a lot of Pokemon that aren't very flexible as well. Like Sylveon's going to be running most of the same stuff. Raichu, Diggersby, even like they don't have very flexible sets.
Yeah, where this team falls short for me is you have a bunch of Pokemon that like to set up. You only have one Fake Out, and you have no redirection. On top of that, the speed control for the team is pretty lackluster.
But you do have an Intimidate and a Scrappy unit, so...
Yeah, it's not the worst. There's some decent utility. There's good damage. I think it's just going to be a matter of, is there too much offense and not enough supporting pieces here? Because obviously the damage is here. Can that damage actually get an opportunity to click damage buttons? All right, next up we have AG Plays.
This is very interesting.
I think it might be the only Mega Heracross we have in the format.
And Chimecho.
Yeah, so really interesting Mega Duo here. Obviously, there's Mega Greninja as well, which we have a couple of. Yeah, really interesting team.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, I've said before, Whimsicott, one of the best Tier 1 Pokemon. You have Ariados down there to help. I just worry about his Megas being very weak. Even Greninja is, like, considered a weaker Mega Pokemon.
Yeah, and even as someone who planned to pick it, I do think it requires setup. Like, Greninja's move pool is relatively weak. Weather Ball is one of the best moves it gets. Sunny Day is the only thing that Whimsicott has here. There's no snow setup, so Greninja's moves are going to be a little on the weaker side. It is really fast, though, with Ariados that could be good. I think Mega Heracross's ideal partner is Whimsicott, because that thing hits like a freaking truck, but it's just slow.
Yeah, but the 2 Intimidates help that out a lot. And then you do have Basculegion. Like, that's also one of the better Tier 1 Pokemon.
Right, and so if you can clear 1 to 2 Pokemon in the early game with like a Mega Heracross, Basculegion will clean that game right up. I think this team is super easy to use. I think it's just a matter of if you can get the job done during those Tailwind turns or with your Fake Out turns, or I'm clicking Redirection and I'm clicking Damage.
Yeah, it's not very flexible.
Can I kill them before they kill my Ariados? Because if that happens and I have no Redirection left, I'm probably dead in the water. But I think from a standpoint of how easy it is to play, we're clicking Tailwind, we're clicking Fake Out, we're clicking Redirection, and we're clicking Damage buttons. Like, it seems super simple.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this team is probably middle of the road in terms of overall cohesion, but I think if you were a newer player, I think this would be a really simple team to pilot, because some people might overcook, and then even if you're of equal skill, this team is just going to win out because it's so easy to play.
Yeah, it just has so much damage to it.
Right, and I believe Umbi is our last player in Group 3 here. Another team that's, you know, pretty easy to play here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the only Mega Scizor team in the entire draft as well.
Which is surprising, because that thing also hits like a truck.
I think it's very underrated as a Tier 1. Obviously, Charizard Y is a very good duo for Scizor. I think Scizor is better in Rain, but you do have some good Sun options here too.
Yeah, and you can also think about it in counter matchup where it's like, what is good into Charizard? Rain. What is good in Rain? Scizor. And so it's like, against Rain teams, bringing Scizor feels like super easy. You never really have to fight for the weather because it wants to be in the rain anyway. You have pretty solid Charizard pairings here with Tauros Blaze being able to take advantage of the sun, Venusaur being great in the sun. You have good Trick Room options with Mimikyu. You're lacking Fake Out setup and Redirection here, but I think overall this team feels pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it seems pretty easy to use. I really like Hydreigon here as well with his 2 Mega Pokemon beside it.
They can both be defensive pivots for each other, right? What's good into Hydreigon is not necessarily good into the Megas, and obviously Hydreigon being quad weak to Fairy, both of these Megas can swap in on it no problem.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is I worry that this team is a little too weak outside of your top 3 Pokemon.
Yeah, for sure. Swampert, Espeon, Pyroar, Lycanroc to some extent. I do think Lycanroc is good for opposing fire types that want to come into the sun, but I believe this is the tier 4 Lycanroc, which gets Sand Rush, not Tough Claws. And so it does feel slightly out of place, even if it can be a good counter option.
Overall, it's not a bad team.
Yep, pretty easy to use, pretty solid. Next, kicking off Group 4, we have iSimp for Yamiko with the Strasbourg Swallows.
Essentially a single Mega Electros, which I'm not a big fan of, especially because you have Aerodactyl and Electros here, but you only have one ground type in Swampert, and Swampert's a relatively weak ground type in this meta.
Yeah, you'd really like to see something like a Garchomp as the tier 1 here, or maybe a Diggersby tier 4.
I think both of your tier 1 Pokemon are very redundant as well. Like Sneasler and Ensign, obviously they fill different roles, but they kind of also do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am biased towards double Fake Out teams because of Fake Out cycling for setup. But I think that being said, Electros is not the best setup mon in the format. It's not like you can click a Nasty Plot. I think its only setup options are Coil and Bulk Up. It doesn't actually have special setup. Doesn't even have something like a Swords Dance. So I agree, it can definitely be redundant in that aspect. because all you really need for Tailwind, for Fake Out on this team rather, is to set up your speed control.
Yeah, it's just Aerodactyl, and I guess you could probably do some stuff with like Poltergeist, but I'm not sure what that thing really does.
Yeah, the Eel is one of those megas where I do think it would be great in Tail Room teams, but I think the Trick Room mode on this one is a little lackluster.
Yeah, especially with Neasler and Aerodactyl, it's hard to use for sure.
And then on the flip side of that, some of these options are just not fast enough to play in Tailwind. So like Hydrapple, Vaporeon, Avalugg, these things are all very slow, and you're not going to be able to play them in your Tailwind mode. And so I kind of wonder what they're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see. I think this is a relatively mid-tier team for what we've seen so far.
Yeah, he is obviously a veteran, decent player.
Yeah, they've been around for a while.
So we're curious to see what they cook up with this one. All right, next up in Group 4, we have Friendship and Good Pals with the Mauville City Renegades.
Yeah, I mean, this has some Pokemon that I've actually ran a lot with on the ladder. Like, I've used Staraptor and Raichu, both Mega, on the ladder, like on the same team together, and I had some pretty good success with it. This team overall looks like picked a lot of popular picks.
Yeah, and I think, as I said before in the video, I think there's some Megas that just don't mesh well together in their base forms. I think this is one where Raichu base is a great Lightning Rod support for Staraptor, and so you can totally bring both of those to a week, and somebody has to play the mind game of what role is Raichu actually filling here, because it can function as a support, it can function as a Mega, it can function kind of as both if you want it to. Sceptile obviously not really filling that role. Staraptor can come as a non-mega, click Tailwind, click Final Gambit. I think this team is really flexible.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you just have a lot of good value picks here too. Like, I think I'm pretty biased, but Gyarados is one of the better value picks in my opinion for tier 2.
Yeah,
Obviously, Liepard, Tinkaton.
especially with its quad weakness being covered by the Raichu. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think
No, you're good.
this is an ideal
Yeah,
situation for Gyarados.
yeah. I just think Gyarados is a very good like defensive pivot for a few of these mons as well. Like Liepard and Tinkaton, they're weak to fighting and ground. Gyarados is great into both of those.
Yeah, this is. I mean, there's not much to say about this team. It's really solid. I think the only thing that I don't necessarily like about this team is it's a Mega Sceptile where your discharge user is going to be Raichu. That seems somewhat problematic because of the speed tiering. Either you have to keep Sceptile unprotected for a turn while Raichu discharges after Sceptile attacks, or you have to speed tier Sceptile down below base Raichu, which isn't that good at 110. Obviously, I'm running Mega Sceptile as well, but I have Scarfed Rotom, so that can go before max speed Mega Sceptile.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only interaction here that I'm not super sold on, but I think other than that, the team seems really solid.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to use and pretty solid.
Moving on, we have French Toast Syrup.
Mega Crab, Mega Aggron. This is a definite Trick Room team with both of his Megas being very slow.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the easiest Trick Room to get up. With that being said, your Fake Out support is a little bit weak. You have Grim, but Trick Room setters aren't the strongest in the format either.
Yeah,
It's the only. I guess Klefki technically has Trick Room, right?
yeah, it does. Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Which can function inside of Trick Room because it has Prankster. Ditto and Zoroark make this team a little hard to use. I think ultimately this team is we get up Trick Room or we die.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's not very flexible, and I think it's gonna be very hard against some teams that could run like an imprisoned Trick Room setter, and then you just can't play the game.
Yeah, you do have some outs where like Aggron can just Iron Defense, Body Press against some teams without needing Trick Room because of how tanky it is. You can play behind screens with Grimmsnarl. Actually, you can play behind screens with Klefki too. We have two Prankster screen setters here, which is a bit redundant. But ultimately, this team is kind of hard locked to Trick Room. I think if any midseason trades are going to be made on this team, it's going to be to add flexibility outside of that mode for sure. Overall, not the worst team. It has very clear direction. It's just that direction is very predictable and not the easiest to use. Next, we have Jabba's team. So this is actually another team where we do have Megaflow at +1.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mega Dragology is a pretty good secondary Mega. like aside from Floette. I think
Mhm.
like if you don't want to bring Floette, you can bring the other pretty safely.
Yeah,
I
I think
like
Trickology is also one of those Pokemon that can operate outside of its Mega in a Trick Room mode because base Trickology has
adaptability.
adaptability. Exactly. So it can fill other roles. Actually, base Trickology was more expensive than Mega, and so it's
Yeah.
a pretty solid option.
I think this team has a lot of good value picks. I think Palafin is very strong for a tier 2. You have Sinistra, very good redirector, and then you have a fast. If I think it's the fastest fake out in the game, and then you have 3 intimidates.
Yeah, Intimidate obviously being great for Floette, being great for Palafin getting in safely if you cycle them. Sinistra obviously being a great redirector for setup mons. Who better than Floette?
Diggersby.
Yeah, obviously biased preacher of Dickersby Church over here. No, but for real, Dickersby Staraptor seems like a solid mode. I think Arcanine is one of the better tier twos in the format. A lot of value crammed into this one and a lot of flexible options, you know. Like you
Yeah,
said,
this team is very popular too.
we have our fake out, we have our tailwind, we have our redirection, we have our trick room. Like it's very box checking, which is Jabba likes to make sure he's covering all his bases. So this does feel like a very Jabba team. Next we have Timp's team. So
So yeah, this team looks like it has some decent flexibility in the fact that you can run Trick Room and Tailwind with pretty good setters of each. I just think that I think your Mega Pokemon are they're just in a weird speed tier to where they can be ran in both, but if you do one or the other, it's hard to run.
yeah,
It's hard to play against the other.
it's very predicated on having this speed control advantage where you're going up against a slower team that doesn't really have a great tailwind mode, use tailwind. If you're going up against a team that has a good tailwind mode but really doesn't have monster play in trick room, click trick room. But if you're against teams that are speed sandwiches where they have a really slow trick room mode and they have a really fast tailwind mode, this team's kind of going to struggle for an identity of what the sequencing looks
Yeah.
like because they're not going to beat you on either end of the speed tier.
Yeah. With that being said, though, I think you kind of it's pretty flexible in a sense that you can run either like Tailwind or Trick Room every week. It's just like you said, it's gonna be hard against certain teams. But I think the team overall is pretty easy. I think these Mega Pokemon are very easy. Just kind of just click buttons. The only thing I would say is you have a decent redirector for Blastoise, but it's not the strongest.
Yeah, I almost think that for the tiers of picks here, you could consolidate Talonflame and Clefable into a Vivillon and just have a stronger team. With that
Yeah.
being said, though, Blastoise obviously loves having Tail Room, so having Farigiraf and Talonflame is great. I'm somebody who's not really sold on Mega Venusaur in draft format. I think if you know what's coming, obviously it still does have two weaknesses. With that being said, though, it is a solid complement to Blastoise just because of the typing.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, this team has a lot of popular picks, so it's not a terrible team. I just think the cohesion is going to be kind of weird.
I think this team is definitely middle of the road, but I think
Yeah.
it's popular and it's the popular picks have good stab distribution and it's pretty solid defensively too. So expect this team to do well. Speaking of teams that are faster than you in Tailwind, we have the Jam and Quillfish here who have some of the fastest megas in the entire format.
Yeah, Mega Aerodactyl and Mega Ninja. The only issue is you obviously can't bring both of them at the same time. But you do have a priority block in Serena and probably the best prankster Pokemon outside of Whimsicott and Sableye. So I think this team is pretty decent to use. It's just what Mega do you want to bring each week?
Right, and it's also very hyper offensive. This team is
Yeah.
really frail. It's really fast. Sableye can run so many different things, but it's about bringing the correct thing. Like screens are not that great with this. Encore disable stuff, Quash can be really good. Fast Willow could be really good. But if you make the wrong calls in your prep, or if you make the wrong calls in game, they can bite you really quick with this team just because of how fragile it is.
It's very interesting to me because we saw a lot of people take Aerodactyl, but not Mega Aerodactyl. So
Mhm.
I wonder if you could have taken just regular Aerodactyl and then a different Mega.
but I think this is like easily the fastest team that we've seen so far, and it
Yeah.
probably doesn't even need Tailwind for half of its modes. It is a little bit one-dimensional in that regard, where something like, and I know I'm a merchant, Tinkaton with Moldbreaker to get past this Serena can kind of just fry this team.
Yeah, but there's only one Tinkaton.
That's very true. That is very true. But yeah, fast, hyper offensive, pretty frail. I think if you can pilot it well, you're going to put a lot of people on the back foot. I think if you ever get on the back foot, it's going to be really tough to wrestle back tempo. But
Yeah, I agree.
hey, that's what some people like. Next up, we have Jackie's team. Another Mega Gengar.
Yeah, this is a team that can. This is probably the first Gengar team or the second Gengar team that can probably run a decent Perish Trap mode.
With Primarina as well, yeah. Obviously, you have the Vivillon to buy turns. Fourth Worm, obviously, you can swap in for Gengar. I think it's not particularly flexible because you do have 3 Megas that don't really want to operate out of their Mega in the context of this team. But you do obviously have picks like Vivillon where it's got 3 great sets that it can run. It does feel a little top-heavy, though.
Yeah, and like although you do have Rage Powder, I think having a single fake out with Gengar is a little rough, and it being a tier 5, I think you lose a little bit of value there. But overall, this team obviously has a lot of popular picks, so it's going to be pretty decent.
I think it's not the easiest one in terms of flexibility, but I think it's a pretty strong team. And so I think if you can try to mix it up and try to keep people on their toes, I think you can do well with this team. Next we have Peggles.
Another Mega Scrafty, and then Mega Scovillain. I think Mega Scovillain actually has a pretty good place here with Key Gambit and Garchomp.
Yeah, with King Gambit specifically, I like it a lot. Obviously, Scovillain with any setup Pokemon is fantastic, and King Gambit is one of the best in the format.
And then I think you have some of the best value picks in Raichu, Hisuian Typhlosion, and Ariados. Like those Pokemon kind of play above their tier, so I think they round out the team pretty well here.
Yeah, I think the issue with this team becomes, do those value picks mesh together? Like, it feels like they went really heavy on the value and maybe ended up with something that's not the most cohesive thing ever. Like, Garchomp really doesn't like any of these pairings on the team. Typhlosion and Ninetales have a bit of a redundant typing there. Scovillain isn't the best in its base form, even though it has Chlorophyll with Ninetales. Um, it's okay. It just doesn't particularly feel easy to use, and it doesn't feel particularly strong outside of the obvious combos like Scoville and King Gambit setup.
It'll be very interesting though, because a lot of these Pokemon are just high value for their picks.
For sure. Up next, we have Bill W. with the Cleveland Camerups.
Typical Sand team.
Which, ironically, we haven't seen many of. We saw the one team where it was Mega
Yeah,
X.
Mega Excadrill, yeah. But that was the Sand and Snow team.
Right. This one is very committed to sand. You know, Excadrill, Tyranitar, Houndstone, all prefer to be in sand. Hydreigon as a defensive pivot for this team, along with the Rotom. This is as sand balanced as you get, but obviously, the big outlier here, the Mega is Hawlucha.
Yeah, I mean, you can run Mega Beedrill in certain matchups. Like, I think it's pretty good against, obviously, a Floette matchup or something. But having 2 lower tier Megas could be hard to use. I will say that I think Excadrill in Sand is basically a Mega Pokemon in itself.
Yeah, I just do wonder if with this kind of team, it makes more sense to just pick Mega Tyranitar at tier 0 for the sand control. But it is playing sand. That is what it is playing, and it is not being shy about it. That's pretty much it. Last but not least, in Group 4, we have Huxley with a Mega Meganium, Mega Chandelure team.
That's the first time we've seen either of those Mega Pokemon.
Which is surprising, because I feel like Mega Chandelure at tier 2 was something that I really had my eye on, but it just didn't fit with the game plan that I had. So
yeah, I just think it hits very hard, but it's a very hard Pokemon to use in certain matchups.
Its speed tier can be awkward as well, where it's in that
Yeah.
Castaways situation where It's not the best in Trick Room. It's not the best in Tailwind. And in this case, it seems like it's playing more of a balanced composition. You know, you have Milo, you have Volcarona, you have Goldango, all Pokemon kind of in a similar speed tier where they're not super fast, they're not super slow. You're playing more off type matchups and positioning with this kind of roster. It doesn't feel like the
Yeah.
synergy is pretty high on this, though. There's no inherent, all right, Milo is here to discourage Intimidates from this Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chandelure could be good alongside a Malayek or something. Obviously, it's very redundant typing with Goldingo as both being ghost types. I think my biggest issue with this team is you have a lot of setup and you only have 2 fake outs, which aren't the strongest fake outs, and you have only 1 redirection.
Right, and your redirection is one of the mons that can actually set up as well, so it almost feels like taking a more supportive Mega with this kind of roster as your secondary option, rather than having 2 selfish Megas, quote unquote, would be a little bit better, but I think,
It'll definitely be interesting to see how Huxley uses this team.
yeah, he's a good player. He can always cook stuff up, so. That concludes PokePeak's power rankings of groups 1 through 4. Check back for groups 5 through 8 coming soon, TM.